welcome to latest people in the room. Welcome for this journey. Oh, we have a... We're okay? Welcome for this journey into shared decision making. It's going to go fast, so I hope you're ready. Last week, I opened the New York Times and I read this essay with the words chaos and order in the same sentence. So keep that in mind. We'll get back to it in a few minutes. And it was about how collaboration is the only way to keep navigating in an uncertain world and to meet the needs of the people. The essay was talking mostly about governments and countries, but also about corporations. So how do we train corporations to embrace true collaboration? For some, collaboration is built within traditional organizational models that have a hard time letting go of control and letting go of cost-cutting approaches. And then other organizations have found a different path, sometimes for decades, where they put the people at the center, truly. And they rely on the abilities of every single member of the organization to achieve their goals. They connect to the purpose of the organization, sometimes without really knowing the word. I mean, today it's a very common word to talk about the purpose of an organization, but 30 years ago I don't think it was. And yet these people connected to why do we exist? They connected with the values they wanted to share. And we are going to go into a journey of these organizations I have interviewed and followed for many years. I started by sharing these stories with my clients, and then after more than 10 years ago, and then after a while I decided to write a book about them so that more people would be aware of what can be done. Okay? I'm going to take you into a journey into 3 different circles showing the impact of the empowerment that these companies have put forward. So let's begin with the people. The first impact that empowerment can have is obviously on the people within the company. So we're talking about leaders who believe that everyone has the ability to achieve goals in the company for the collective. And so as I was saying, they were building on the purpose, on the values of the company. Some of them created what we call trust-based management. So they really see the world and the people in this world in a specific way. And the organization as a group of people who want to achieve something together. It's pretty much the definition of an organization, right? Other people started doing things differently, little by little, changing little things here and there. And they wanted to create space to experiment with decision making. And so they created company just to have a chance to experiment. Brian Robertson is one of these people. He created a company to experiment with what he called later holacracy, which builds on sociocracy with the intention to find a way to live and work together in a more full, embracing, and powerful way. I'd be curious to hear, if I say holacracy and sociocracy, are you familiar with these words? No? Yes? Yes? No? Mostly no? Okay. I started talking about this topic in 2016, and at the time, even the words were not known. Little by little, I see that more people say yes or raise their hands, and some of them have experimented with that model because it's a very powerful one. If you have to remember 3 things I'm going to share with you about holacracy and sociocracy, we call that circle-based governance. This is the traditional vision of an organization with layers, many people at the bottom, less people at the top. It's a triangle, it's a pyramid. In this pyramid, you have people who are working toward the same goal. It can be a goal cross-function, cross levels. And if you focus on the goal of these different peoples that are actually circles within the organization, you can turn your organization into a series of circles. What is important is that you have one circle, one goal, and a series of roles within that circle. if those are the three things that you remember about circle-based organizations, that's all you need, okay? Roles are very clear. The white dots are the people connecting one circle with the others so that all the circles are actually after the same goal for the entire organization. When I interviewed people for my book, lots of them, even if their organization was not that far into the process, were inspired by that book by Frederic Laloux. Who has heard about Reinventing Organization? Cool. The book was published 10 years ago. It was an exploration of different organizations, again, real-life examples that had started doing things differently in terms of management and leadership. Learning was really at the core for these organizations because they were experimenting new ways of doing things, sometimes just intuitions that they were following because they wanted to change what had been done before. And teal organizations is the ultimate level of organization with three different characteristics. They are based on wholeness, which I would describe as the ability to be the same person at work and outside of work. It's based on self-management. Teams take charge of every single work they have to do to sustain the organization and the activity. So it can be budget, it can be strategy, training, hiring, conflict. And of course, when it's an area that was not really their job, they are trained to learn those new activities that are necessary to the company. And then an evolutionary purpose, I mentioned earlier, connecting to why the company exists. And sometimes we even say what would be missing in the world if that company did not exist. So in these organizations, you see that training is actually at the core. And the leaders who changed the way of working, the way of leading, the way of managing, were focusing on the experience of their people. And we have now a lot of studies that document how impactful that can be. The quality of life at work can impact the focus of the teams, the relationships, of course. It can impact their productivity. It can impact the way they connect with the customers, and so customer loyalty. It can impact the retention, the turnover, and in the end, it impacts the performance, productivity, and financial results, of course. When we start talking about the people in the organization, we quickly realize that we can have an impact on the people beyond the walls of the organization. So the second circle, the second impact, is about the stakeholders and the sustainability of the company. In the late 1990s, the head of prospective for Shell realized that he could see around him many companies who had been around for much longer than was expected. At the time, the life expectancy of a Fortune 500 company was 50 years. Now it's 20. And he could see companies that were much older than 50 years, and he wondered what did they have? What were they doing differently that would help them survive for so long? And one of the observations that he made was that they were very connected and sensitive to their environment, meaning they were able to follow what was going on around them, to connect, to expand when the context was favorable, to focus when it was not, and also to identify new areas at the edge of the companies where they could develop new activities and new ideas. Other characteristics, but this is the main one. It was also the foundation for what was called later the learning organization. Do you know this book, The Fifth Discipline? Yeah. So the learning organization, again, different characteristics, but two of them are that the collective aspiration is set free. So it's really about letting people do what they have to do. And one of the other characteristics is that they have people who learn how to learn every day together. So learning how to learn is at the core of the learning organization. So you can see that learning is really key in the change in the way people manage and lead in their organizations and how they connect to the outside world, which is how they survive much longer than would be expected. In that area, we have a few examples when it can be very useful. With HCL Tech, which is an IT company in India, the boss started his job with a company that was about to go bankrupt. He decided to go and listen to the teams, and then he decided to turn the pyramid upside down. His reasoning was that the pyramid was actually people following orders from above when they were in touch with the customers. And he said, this is not working. We need to follow the people who are in touch with the customers. And so that's what he called turning the pyramid upside down. Talking about connecting with the customer, Michelin, who has a really long track record in terms of empowerment, has realized that customer complaints gave them a chance to do a better job with their customers. They call that turning glitches into gems. So they said, if you have in front of you a customer with a complaint, here is your chance to do your job. And so we're going to make everything possible for you to do that job properly and give you the power to answer what you feel you need to answer to make that customer feel satisfied and go away happy to have dealt with that with our company. It's not only in terms of crisis that empowerment is useful. We have the case of Airbus. They had a new program that was started. The pace of production was much faster than what they were used to. And they quickly realized that the usual way of deciding and delegating would not work. So the head of the program decided to empower the teams. They learned how to choose a leader, and it didn't go through candidates and elections. They were trained in nonviolent communications because they realized that they were not super competent in terms of giving feedback or receiving feedback. And that's how they managed to accelerate the production for this company. Do you remember at the beginning I told you about this essay in the New York Times mentioning chaos and order? It's actually how Visa was built. The founder, at the time, no one wanted to hear about the program, and he turned it into a company with 20,000 organizations that were members of a network. And that's where chaos and order get into the picture. He combined the two, saying chaos is what you have around you. And all those 20,000 members, you cannot coordinate 20,000 organizations. And yet, they work together, and that's what Visa is all about. So that's where you have the order. They know what they have to do. They know what they're doing it for, and then they can connect. So he combined the two words and created what we call chaotism. Have you ever heard that word? Chaotism? So it's that notion, very useful, and Visa is an old company now, but it's still useful to be able to connect 20,000 members in a free way and yet be able to provide a service that all of us use on a single day, every single day. So if we go beyond the people inside and outside the organization, we can also use empowerment to have an impact on the planet. And for me, the planet means the people on this planet and the environment. I won't get into too much detail, but I think France is very guilty in separating man and nature. So let's try to reconnect the two. We have a different set of examples in that regard. One is the B Corp label. Do we have B Corp organizations in the room? No? Yes? Okay, cool. So B Corp is a label. An organization can answer a set of questions about its social practices and the way it deals with the environments. And on those two areas, you get a score that helps you decide if you can label yourself B Corp or not. And it's very useful to connect with like-minded organizations, to follow a different way of making business, and to also attract people who are, and as you probably see in your organizations, more and more concerned with the impact of the company around it. In France, we're lucky to have a legal status which is called mission-driven companies, entreprises à mission in French. it's actually in the law. It's not a company that can say, hey, you know what, I'm super humanistic. Look at me. I have a mission. It's wonderful. It's actually in the law. So it means that the company states its mission in its legal status, as well as its objectives to achieve that mission. And on a regular basis, a third-party organism audits the company to check if it's on the right path to achieve its mission and if it's actually following the objectives that it set for itself. It might become a European standard, but hasn't been achieved yet. Other examples are what we call humanistic companies. So these ones are mostly, the book is in French, the companies are not necessarily French. Someone in the US has something similar. And that what is interesting with that notion of humanistic is that it does not separate the notion of doing business from the notion of doing good. So it's a way to say, if you take care of the people in the company and outside the company, your business will follow. The results will follow. And I would say it's the maximum extension of that idea is social business, which was created by someone who became a Nobel Prize laureate a few years later, Muhammad Yunus. He created a bank. And if you look at that bank, you could say it's almost like an NGO because it was created to take care of people, right? A bank in Bangladesh in the 70s, as you see the picture. And yet, these companies are not NGOs because they can sustain themselves. So they make money that they will bring to the company. So they don't make money for shareholders, they make money for stakeholders. And the last example I would like to share with you is about Patagonia. They're my favorite. Every time I give a talk, you can be sure that I will talk about them because they have really a super interesting story in terms of having an impact and taking care of the people inside, outside, and even taking care of the planet, of course. The story started in the 70s when the company realized that it wanted to do more to help the planet, and it became their reason for being, actually. From taking care of nature while having outdoor activities, they turned into a company that would be in business to save the planet. And in the end, in 2022, the founder decided to give all the stock, voting and non-voting stock, of the company to a trust and to a non-profit, not-for-profit organization, so that every single dollar that the company will make will be turned into actions to help the planet survive humans. And I don't know of any company that has done the same besides Patagonia. So what we're saying here is that ultimately true collaboration is about sharing a clear vision and finding ways for all the members of the organization to turn that vision into a reality. With all the real-life examples, some of them I shared with you, I have more than 60 examples in the book, they show that learning is really central in creating the space and the conditions for shared decision-making, which to me is really the highest expression of true collaboration. I'm done now, and I'd be happy to hear either your feedback on experiences you might have in your organizations, experimentations, or questions on the few frameworks I could share with you today in 20 minutes. Yes? Could we have the microphone? Cool. Is it here? Thank you. There was a question here. Sorry.
Hear me? Yes?
Okay. Yes.
Ooh, very good.
Very much so.
Thank you so much for kind of an overview of all these really innovative ways of working. For maybe those of you who hadn't heard of holacracy and sociocracy, take a look more online. This is just really an overview, so thanks for the synthesis.
We'll play decision-making in French tomorrow based on sociocracy, if you're interested. Yeah.
Great. Cool.
4 p.m. tomorrow.
Good. Maybe my question here is, based on all of your observations, what role does culture play in starting this kind of change in a mindset? I'm American, but I've been here in France for 10 years. And when I present some of these ideas to stakeholders in my company, sometimes they look at me with wide eyes like, what? How do
Really?
I let my colleagues make decisions with me? I like making decisions me. So what role does culture play in this kind of transformation? And maybe what kind of tools have you observed that work well to kind of overcome any cultural challenges?
So when you say culture, you mean local culture, comparing countries, or the corporate culture?
Both.
Okay. So local cultures, I don't think it's really the issue. The corporate culture it's at the core of everything we're talking about here. The culture of the company is actually the starting point. And that's why I share so many examples, because I'm not saying, look at Patagonia and do the same. It will not work. If you try to be Coca-Cola when you're a train company, it will not work. And the opposite is actually true. So what matters in these examples is that they started with who they were at the time they were starting. Don't try to be someone else. You know that quote, don't try to be someone else. That's already taken. It's true with companies. So they start with their culture and start where they are. That's why the values are so important. The values are really who we are and how we do things and what matters to us. And again, there is no bad or not operating value. It's what value you choose to do what you want to do. And the more people you get involved in, for example, picking the values that you want to work for, so as many people as possible, as early as possible, you have a better chance that they will actually be operating. And values are a true decision-making tool. This is a super important part. Values can be used to communicate, and if it talks about what company you are, who you are, that's fine. But they're mostly a decision-making tool. The way you do what you have to do reflects your values. So culture is really at the core of these organizations. And most of them started without realizing that they were changing. They did not say, we're going to lead a revolution in management. They just said, my former boss used to do something. I'm not familiar, I don't like that way of doing things. Sociocracy started that way. So culture is really at the core. Do you have another question? Don't have much time? No? Yes?
Thank you very much. It was very enlightening. Can you hear me well? It's okay?
No, I don't think.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So basically, when I'm thinking of all the ESG initiatives and everything going around, there is a lot of greenwashing as well, So many of the companies are doing it just because there are regulations, they want to have a better image. So how, as a customer, and how durable these enterprises are, and what really sets the authentic ones apart. So I just wanted to have your views on that. A case in point is, for example, Grameen Bank. You mentioned about Mohammed Yunus. So when I was at Danone, I had a chance to work with Mr. Yunus for the Grameen Bank. The thing is, there are a lot of controversies even for these companies with regard to the high interest rates, for example. So sometimes as a customer and as a outsider, it's very difficult to evaluate the authenticity and the true intent of these companies. Would just love to hear your views on this topic in general. Thanks.
I guess, it's a huge question. We have 10 seconds left. So I guess they navigate between obligations and also expectations. My conviction is that you have to start somewhere. So if your business or your culture was not really in line with all the examples we gave, you have to start somewhere. And no company is perfect all the time. So at least if you, try to get there, it's a starting point. And then if you don't, you will no longer have customers within, I don't know if it's 5 years or 50 years, but you won't have customers, you won't have investors, and you won't have teams. Teams are the first ones that are really careful about where they set foot. So this is a short answer to a very important question. All right, thank you very much. I see that time is up. Thank you, and feel free to reach out and meet me. I'll be at the book signing booth today and tomorrow, and back in the Las Vegas room for a game tomorrow on decision making in French. Thank you very much.